It's time for Parts in the Sum of the Whole. A weekly podcast designed to inform the masses on just about any topic you can think of. We always encourage your comments, so drop us a line. And now, from our world headquarters in Bidwell, Ohio, here's the philosopher monk, Ronnie Glenn, and the Vance man, Brian Vance.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the July 14th edition of Parts in the Sum of the Whole. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Everyone listening and a big crowd here in our studio audience. You know, Ronnie, it's in the middle of summertime pretty much. A lot of folks are listening to our podcast mobile on vacation. They might be at the beach or somewhere.
Wish I could go on vacation.
That would be nice. I would love to do the show from a beach somewhere.
I would just take my computer with me and do the same thing there that I do here every day. It'd just be prettier to be on a beach.
Well, just make sure you turn every half hour or you're going to get a big sunburn on your back.
Well aware of that pitfall. Worst sunburn I ever had was when the high school band went to the Bahamas to perform down there, and I spent one afternoon on the beach building this huge sand sculpture, which I thought turned out to be pretty cool, but I didn't think about the fact that nearly 5 hours, nothing but my back was exposed to the sun.
Yeah, it kind of adds up.
And it was horrible. Thank God I got drunk that night.
Well, that helps.
It's the worst sunburn I ever had. Most drunk I've ever been. Same night. It was fun.
Well, yeah, you were on a boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were on a
cruise ship.
Before they started turning over and sinking.
Yeah. Or catching on fire inexplicably.
Back in the good old days when we could take a cruise and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Actually be on vacation. Well, we have trivia coming up later on in the show, and today a chance for you to win a Facebook gift card and buy items in your favorite games and apps on Facebook. It was very popular the first time around, so we're giving away another one. I want to congratulate our winner of the trivia last week. It was Leslie Gordon Martin who got the trivia question correct. The trivia question, how many countries are in the European Union? And the answer was?
27. All right.
27. Congratulations. I want to say happy birthday to a good friend of ours listening in Athens, Ohio. It is Sean Hardy, and he's celebrating his 29th birthday, Ronnie, today. And so, Sean, happy birthday, and thanks for tuning in. We know your brother very well, Pat, who contributes to the show here, and he's got a contribution this week on Black Sabbath, their newest album, 13, and we'll give you that in a little bit. We want to send our thoughts and prayers out to Randy Travis, country music singer, of course, responsible for some great hits, and he's had some health issues in the past, but had a stroke this past week, and he's in critical condition in a Tennessee hospital, and we are thinking of him, and he is a big part of country music, definitely. And
definitely wouldn't wish that to happen to somebody.
No. We got a full show today, and our first segment here pretty much dedicated to the different trials. Jodi Arias aside, that's coming up this week, and we'll see that getting fired back up. But the big one this week, the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin trial.
In the Circuit Court of the 18th Judicial Circuit in and for Seminole County, Florida, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict, we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all foreperson.
So breaking news right there in a nutshell. Saturday night, the verdict comes in after 16 hours. A jury of 6 women decides not guilty for George Zimmerman.
Terrible news.
Well, there's no winners in this situation because the country's upside down with which direction to go at this point. It's just a mess.
Well, President Obama issued a statement after the verdict was read that basically boiled down to, our courts and our justice system didn't find him guilty, and if we still want to do something to honor Trayvon Martin's memory, we should look at this and use it to further proposals to try to tamp down gun control. It's one of those situations where you can't go back and fix it, but try to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And revisiting the Stand Your Ground law in Florida and some other states may be the first start.
Yeah, it really is not logical at all. According to your home is your castle doctrine, if somebody comes into your house or your property, if you don't have a duty to retreat from an impending attack, you can defend your house and blah, blah, blah. The Stand Your Ground law made that public, but this is one of those laws that was written by a conservative little organization called ALEC and had immense support from the National Rifle Association and is passed. About a dozen states have this law, and surprise, surprise, they all passed it under Republican majority governments. But if you wanted to see a silver lining somewhere, back when O.J. Simpson was on trial for the Nicole Brown murders, he was found not guilty. The parents of the victims filed a civil suit, and it was judged in their favor, and O.J. Simpson owed the families this huge amount of money, and he had to sell a lot of things, to try to raise the money, and he went bankrupt and stuff, and down the line, he's in jail now because he tried to steal back some of his stuff. So he's behind bars in a sequence of events that
stemmed from the
came
original,
down from the not guilty verdict. So I imagine Martin's parents will file a civil suit. I mean, they have every right to. Zimmerman didn't get out of liability in that regard, but you never know. He could end up in jail down the road, even if it's not for this charge. At least he could still end up behind bars. That's where OJ is.
So even the federal government is looking into possible hate crime type of charges, but it's not over yet.
There'll probably be a civil suit, if nothing else. I don't see how the government could call it a hate crime.
No, I expect that, and they'll win a civil suit.
Oh, yeah, I imagine you don't have the same burden of proof in a civil suit as you do in a criminal situation. Court.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, they'll win that, but, all in all, the fact remains that Trayvon's dead, and it's an awful situation all around.
It ain't pretty.
Another trial that's in the headlines, Bradley Manning's court-martial. What's going on with that, Ronnie?
It's been going on for 5 weeks. The government ended its case this week, and as in almost any trial, the first motion of business for the defense is going to be to submit a motion to have charges dismissed because the state, the government in this case, didn't prove its case. And Manning's defense attorney submitted 4 motions to get not guilty charges declared for these charges, which is a little nuance of a military court that doesn't happen in a civilian court. But one of the charges, and the most important one that everybody's been talking about, is the aiding the enemy charge. And to get convicted of that, he has to have shown intent to aid the enemy or knowingly provided these leaks to WikiLeaks knowing that the enemy was going to read them. And the government hadn't produced any evidence to say that he did have the intent, and the evidence that the government itself had introduced, like the chat transcript with the guy who ratted him out and everything, Manning himself, he didn't intend anything like that. He could have sold the information to another country and got all kinds of money. He could have shopped it around and whatnot, but he didn't do that. So the defense attorney thinks that aiding the enemy should be off the table. Another one was a computer fraud. They said that Manning had broke the law in downloading these cables. And the problem with the charges, they basically say what was illegal was the program that he used to download them, not the information itself. It was an unauthorized program, but at least in regards to that intelligent unit there in that camp, it really wasn't, because soldiers had been able to put their own programs on the Army computers and stuff like that, and it was just a matter of course of business. So he wanted that to be dismissed too. The other most relevant charge is the stealing of government property, but according to law, the property has to be valued at over $1,000, and even the government expert said that there was no way he could evaluate documents. Mm-hmm. So there's no monetary loss, and Manning had to take them to and intend to deprive the government of having them. But he never did that. The government always had the database. The defense attorney doesn't think that the stealing should be either. And I think that his reasoning in submitting each of these motions are well thought out, while at the same time, I don't think the government's going to go for it exactly the way a lot of people think it should and go ahead and dismiss these things. I'm pretty sure they're going to put him in the brig for 20 years anyways, because he's already pled guilty to enough to get him 20 years in jail. Mm-hmm. But these are the further charges that we're sticking on, and the aiding the enemy is the most important one, that is the most controversial charge they had against him. But we'll see how she rules on those motions. She'll probably dismiss all of them probably, and then I imagine the defense will start putting its case on, but they already starting with one hand tied behind their back.
Now, what's the maximum he can get? Aiding the enemy, what would that get you?
Life. They could get you the death penalty if they wanted to pursue it.
Okay. So it is a possible death penalty.
Yeah, the prosecutors have said that they weren't going to go for that, but under the law, it's one of the punishments that you could receive for aiding the enemy.
So we'll keep you informed on the Bradley Manning court-martial. The Boston bombing suspect, the only one remaining, entered pleas this week.
Yeah. He, in the Boston courtroom, pled not guilty, of course, to 30 federal charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction to kill. That could get him the death penalty, and I imagine that the government will go for the death penalty and try to get it. He was also charged in the killing of a MIT police officer, and also charged with the carjacking of a motorist. And while he was there, some of the families that had lost people and some of the victims that had been there on the day that the bomb went were in the courtroom, and they said they needed to see him and whatnot. But the surprising thing I thought was that he had almost just as big a group of supporters outside. They claimed things like his civil rights were violated, and I just thought it was amazing that as many people that were there calling for his head, he had just as many saying, let's let him keep it. I don't think the general public is ever going to think of him as an American because he has a Russian accent. Even if he is an American citizen. I think that's always going to count against him. But I don't think a trial date's been set yet, so when that happens, I'm sure we'll talk about it again.
Coming up, we have details on a Politico 2016 presidential poll they conducted.
You'll be depressed, America, because the presidential race has already started and we're not even at the midterm elections.
We'll take a look at Congress, what happened on the Hill, and also a 51st state, possibly. A young lady from Texas gets kicked out of the Texas Senate for voicing her concern against the abortion bill.
Not just kicked out. She was dragged out by 4 Rangers, probably not Rangers, state troopers, forcibly ejected from the chamber.
We'll highlight that and let you hear some of that, too, here on Parts and the Sum of the Whole.
Hi, I'm Ryan Seacrest for RAD. Over 300 people in this country are killed every week by a drunk driver. That's the equivalent of 2 747 plane crashes every single week. And the problem isn't going away unless we all do our part to stop it. So if you see someone who's about to drive after drinking, get the keys. Don't leave it up to anyone else. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
A public service announcement brought to you by RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
Hey, welcome back to Parts and the Sum of the Whole on our July 14th edition. Thanks for tuning in wherever you may be, at home or mobile somewhere, or on vacation.
Well, wherever you are, we hope you're listening to us.
Yes.
Which I guess, never mind, that sounded stupid. We're smart. Pay no regard.
Politico conducted a poll this past week of 2016 possible presidential candidates, and they included Hillary Clinton and Chris Christie and Rand Paul. And what they come up with so far is Hillary Clinton is leading both Chris Christie and Rand Paul in the 2016 presidential race poll. Clinton holds a 46% to 40% lead over the New Jersey governor, and that poll came out Friday. The former Secretary of State also would beat Kentucky Senator Rand Paul in a head-to-head race. Clinton led Paul 50% to 38%. But it also says Vice President Joe Biden, another Democrat rumored to be in the mix for 2016, didn't fare as well. Biden was trailing Christie 35% to 46% and was in a dead heat with Paul at 42%.
I think the only poll I've seen regarding 2016 is, I think it was a poll of Republicans who overwhelmingly decided that they were against the idea of Rick Perry running for president in 2016.
I guess Quinnipiac surveyed 2,014 registered voters by phone from June 28th to July 8th for the poll, which has an error margin of plus minus 2.2 percentage points.
Well, we heard
Interesting.
About Chris Christie. We heard an interesting theory from the editor of the Progressive magazine, who thinks that there's a good chance that Obama will replace outgoing Secretary Napolitano with Chris Christie. We'll have to see if that bears itself out. He presented a pretty good case, but I still find it hard to believe.
But all in all, he said that he doesn't see Christie winning a 2016 nomination.
Well, having to put the time into being Homeland Security would pretty much preclude him from running in the 2016 race. So it could be a little strategy by the Democrats to make sure Hillary doesn't have any competition, really.
Could be. Could be a lot of different things, like...
You gotta hate the snake oil world of politics and elections.
Ronnie, let's move to the Hill real quick. What happened in Congress this week?
The House finally passed a farm bill, except they didn't pass what has traditionally been a farm bill since they stripped out the food stamps program. The food stamps and the agriculture bill have always gone together, and the budget funding for those bills in the past, only 20% goes to agriculture. Most of that legislation, 80% of those funds go for food assistance, and the Republican House snuck in and passed this bill without a food stamp provision.
It's all about going after Americans who are struggling in poverty. It's all about denying the working poor the right to food. So when we're asked to trust Republican leaders, to give them the benefit of the doubt, I can't. Trust is something that is earned, and the behavior of this Republican House towards programs that help the working poor, the needy, and the vulnerable has been appalling.
Says here it was a 216 to 208 vote.
Yeah, the minority whip, Steny Hoyer, was upset and called Republicans out for breaking their own rules. Usually, they have this rule where you wait 3 days before you voted on a bill, and they brought this in like a Texas legislature house and did it in the middle of the night, 12th hour, just slipped it past everybody. The sad thing about it is that the current legislation that has to do with agriculture and the food policy, it expires at the end of September. And if they don't come up with a new bill, it automatically reverts, and we love how things automatically revert back, to a law that was written in 1949.
Nice.
Yeah, and if that happens, a lot of the mechanisms we have in place for food to remain barely affordable will be shot, and you could see things like milk and eggs and, agriculture, farm stuff, just the price shoot through the roof.
What prompted them to exclude the food stamp program in this farm bill this time?
They infamously didn't pass the farm bill a couple weeks ago. And it's because legislators started tacking on amendments to it. And when it got to the House said we're not going to vote on it. And then came the huge backlash from the public because a lot of people depend on food assistance. 1 in 4 kids are in that program. They benefit from that program.
Well, it says 48 million Americans have food stamps.
But I think that they had to pass something, or they tried to pass something to give the public the image that they were doing something. So they passed a farm bill. But I think it's going to end up, since the half that wasn't voted in constitutes most of the funds that would have been in one unified farm bill, I think the House Republicans will hold it hostage because it's entirely about money. They'll use it the same way they held the debt ceiling over our heads and everything else. And judging on their history in the past few years, I think that's the most likely way it's going to go.
It used to be when you were unemployed, that stuff came to screeching halt, including eating.
Could you live on $133 a month for food?
No.
Andrea?
I should try it because do you know how fabulous I'd look? I'd be so skinny.
More than 16 million children face a summer of hunger. Now, Michelle Obama told us they're all so fat and out of shape and overweight that a summer off from government eating might be just the ticket.
Poor people in America have an obesity problem, and yet we give more people food stamps.
There's always the neighborhood dumpster. Now, you might find competition with homeless people there, but there are videos that have been produced to show you how to healthfully dine and how to dumpster dive and survive until school kicks back up in August.
What is the nuke option? I've read stuff about the nuclear option.
Yeah, it's a little colloquial name for it. In that same piece a couple of weeks ago where I was mad about them wasting time on pointless legislation, I was also mad about the Republicans as a party bloc filibustering just everything that comes down the line in the Senate. They're backlogged on confirming nominations that could have drastic consequences for things like labor relations and stuff like that, just because they have said that they're just not going to confirm anybody to run these agencies and stuff like that. The nuclear option is something that was first conceptualized back in 1890 when there was a problem about the South keeping African Americans from voting. Big surprise. They wanted to pass a bill that would allow U.S. military forces to go into the South and intercede, letting these African Americans vote. The process basically boils down to this. People have heard of the supermajority and the majority. For some kind of legislation, you have to have a supermajority, which is 68 or so. Some of it you can just have 60. The problems our Democrats are having in the Senate today is that they hold a majority, but not enough votes to be able to count on having enough votes for a supermajority. There's this tricky little fine line details kind of process where they get the president of the Senate they submit a motion and about a bill that would require a supermajority. And they expect the president of the Senate to deny that motion. Then it reverts to a procedural thing, which they don't need a supermajority for, and they have enough votes to do as a party if they had to do it, where they overturn the president of the Senate's dismissal of the motion, and the motion gets carried through. So they know they don't have enough votes to get it the way they're supposed to get it because Republicans are filibustering. So they get the president of the Senate to start this chain of events of procedural matters which don't require a supermajority, and then that's how they get the legislation pushed through past obstructionist filibusters.
Interesting.
It's political science, but if you have very public statements by the leaders of the Republican Party that they're just going to block any nomination that comes down and they're just doing it to obstruct, then you have to do what you can. It's not like they have an ideological problem with the nominees. A lot of Republicans will say, you know, all the Democrats did the same thing back during Bush, but Bush was trying to appoint judicial nominees that were right-wing ideology biased. And they had a problem with those, because federal judge appointments are for life, you know. They had a problem with the ideological justices being confirmed, so they kind of did that. But that's not the way it is this time. It's not even about who is nominated. The Republicans have just said they're going to filibuster every nomination. Yeah. So it's not, they don't really have a moral footing to get support to continue their filibustering, or even to condemn this technical action that the Democrats could conduct in the Senate to get things moving again.
And I guess a bipartisan group of senators that includes Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, John McCain, among others, introduced an updated version of the since repealed 1933 Glass-Steagall Act.
Yeah.
What was the Glass-Steagall Act?
Well, everybody has heard of the stock market crash in 1929 that ushered in the Great Depression and everything.
Yeah.
It was because you had these huge banks, financial houses, and they were investing, which is risky, and these other things with the average citizen's money that they had put in the bank, you know, for savings or checking blah, and everything collapsed. And one of the things they did to fix that, they wrote law that separated the investment bank from the normal bank so that the investment banks couldn't risk consumers' money. And then at the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, the corporations and the big bankers on Wall Street successfully got them to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act. From the time that law was enacted in 33 till the time it was repealed in 99, there had been no crisis like had happened before that, which just goes to show that that law was working, but they repealed it. And Wall Street got to do what got us into the 2008 economic crisis because they got to reintegrate the investment in the commercial banks.
So that's what this is about.
Yeah, they want to bring it back. There's a couple of new tweaks to it, but essentially it will re-separate the two sides of banking to put that firewall in between them so that even if the investment bank's risks get called and they lose all their money, they're not losing the everyday person's savings account, you know?
Okay. Well, and then a big fiasco in the Texas Senate.
Oh, yeah, you were telling me about this.
Abortion bill. The Texas Senate gave final passage this past Friday to one of the strictest anti-abortion measures in the country, legislation championed by Governor Rick Perry, who rallied the Republican-controlled legislature last month after Democratic filibuster, of course, blocked the bill and intensified already passionate resistance by abortion rights supporters. The bill actually bans abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy and holds abortion clinics to the same standards as hospital-style surgical centers. Mr. Perry applauded lawmakers for passing the bill, but before that, while they were going through the legislative process, before she could finish her one-by-one takedown of members of the Senate committee, Ms. Slayman was forcibly escorted from the chamber. She is pro-choice, and here's what she had to say to them.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Sarah Slayman. I'm a constituent of Senator Whitmire. I'm here to testify against SB 1 because I'm tired of Republican primary politics, misogyny, and greed dominating the state I was born, raised, and schooled in. And you know, I had some really eloquent remarks written out, but you guys have just worn me down all day with all this terrible science and glad-handing. And to be frank, I get to move to New York next month, so I don't have to live in fear of you Texas legislators anymore and what you're going to do to my education system or my health care system, because I'm going to a state that doesn't kill its own inmates. That's how pro-life it is up there. I will thank you, though, first. It was destiny that you would discriminate against us and try to force your way inside the bodies of Texas women. Thank you for finally working against us women so publicly and not in the shadows like you're used to. Thank you for every single bad press conference with your bad information. Thank you for every hateful statement degrading women and girls to sex objects and broodmares and bald eagles and leather wallets like your eloquent pro-life supporters have done today. Thank you for being you, Texas legislature. You have radicalized hundreds of thousands of us. And no matter what you do for the next 22 days, women and their allies are coming for you. Let's start down the line. Senator Campbell, you're an ophthalmologist, so I won't be making you the expert on reproductive health. We can give you all the children with chlamydia and herpes in their eyes since we don't have sex ed in this state. And Senator Hagar, you're about as helpful. You are about as, excuse me, this is my government, ma'am. I will judge you. I will judge you, ma'am. Is this counting against my time?
Yes, it is.
The senator talking against me?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I will just go ahead and talk over her. And this is how big of a fraud I knew you were for being so proud of these proceedings all night. It's a low bar that you hold yourself to, that you simply allowed us to speak. And I will speak against an ophthalmologist who says, everyone on the internet can see what you're doing right now. This is a farce. The Texas legislators, a bunch of liars who hate women.
Our next witness is Gary Oldham. Is Gary Oldham here?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
So that they can tell us what to do with the inside of our bodies.
Go ahead, Mr. Oldham.
So as you can hear there, State Senator Jan Nelson, moving on to the next person, escorting her out, she pretty much said that she became very aggressive towards the senators, and once she started naming them one by one, going down the line, that crossed the line. And
well, maybe so, but she, at least on the first one, where she pointed out that he was an eye doctor and had no real qualifications to judge reproductive health,
right.
I would like to have heard what she was going to say about the other members on the panel, to see why they aren't qualified to judge it either.
Slayman told MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell that she was privileged as a white woman from the middle-class background to be able to attend all of those hearings, and it is obvious that all the Republicans on the committee don't care about the rights of their health care either, so somebody had to say something, and that's why she attended that, and I say hats off to her. I mean, it's my government, ma'am. I will.
It just isn't cool to have
judge you.
The police forces drag you out of what is every citizen's right, guaranteed, if nothing else, by the federal Constitution, and that's the right to petition your government for redress.
Well, pro-life advocates had their chance on the floor, and it seems like the pro-choice didn't, they got rushed away, and
well, of course
this happened. So outside the committee chamber, she was greeted by dozens of sympathizers cheering and applauding her testimony. But it was the Texas bill SB1 and HB2. It limits, again, where women can get an abortion in the state, passed the House last Tuesday and passed the Senate. All right. And real quick, before we head to a break and our trivia question coming up, will North Colorado be the 51st state in the Union? Now, where did this come from?
They are complaining about having to comply with environmental regulations because they want to mine the planet for all the polluting fossil fuel kinds of energy that they can. So there's a group of counties in northeastern Colorado and some in the border states that want to split off to form their own state, a 51st state. And technically, this is allowed under our federal government system, but since it's cutting out a piece of an already existing state, then federal government, Congress has to agree with it, the state legislatures has to agree with it, and since there are two other states involved with counties in those states, those legislatures would have to agree to it too, and I just don't think that's ever likely. I mean, the last time we split a state was when we split West Virginia off of Virginia, and that was 1863.
Yeah, exactly. I was reading that here. There's been lots of attempts to create new states out of old ones in U.S. history, but the vast majority of them have ended up failing.
You just have to get too many people to agree to it, and all you need is one not to. And I think there would be enough citizens in all of those places to not allow at least one of those parties to agree to it, and all of them would have to.
So I think off the top of my head, I think I will make a trivia question along this subject. Following our trivia question, we will give you a World War IV update, also talk about Edward Snowden, what his latest issue is. And
the Kremlin going retro.
The Kremlin is going retro. It's coming up here on Parts and the Sum of the Whole.
$80, $30, $50.
Every mile brings us closer.
$25.
Every mile in a city near you.
$75.
Help us stop diabetes.
$100.
Join the Tour de Cure.
$60.
Register to ride.
$36.
Or sponsor a rider.
$50. Call 1-888-DIABETES or visit us online at diabetes.org/tour. How many miles will you ride?
25.
In today's world, it's easy to get tunnel vision with current happenings. You can get lost in the confusion. On our weekly podcast, Parts in the Sum of the Whole, we take the whole picture and break it down to understand the parts of the story in the context you should know. We dig for the truth and try to find facts that some try to hide. In general, Parts in the Sum of the Whole is the place to go to find out about everything. Tell your friends and join us each Sunday. Check us out at partsinthesum.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/partsinthesum, on Twitter at partsinthesum, or email us info@partsinthesum.com. And thanks for listening. Get ready for this week's trivia question to win a great prize from our vault. Remember, only one person can win within a 30-day period. Good luck.
Trivia time here on July 14th, 2013. And are you ready? Okay, here it is. We were talking about Colorado, North Colorado, wanting to split off and form their own state. This process has been successfully used in the past to create 5 new states. So, I need the 5 states created from another state. That is the trivia question.
I would think a few of them would be relatively obvious.
Well, they'll put their thinking caps on and see what they can come up with. We need the 5 states that were created out of an original state. We will post the trivia question at 6 p.m. on Monday, July 15th, where everyone will have a shot at it, but you have the upper hand of listening to the podcast. You can look it up and be ready to post. It's on our Facebook page, facebook.com/partsinthesum. Good luck. Facebook gift card up for grabs. Okay, a World War IV update. Do you have anything on what's the latest in Egypt? That's part of World War IV, isn't it? Kind of building Syria, Egypt, in those areas?
Well, it's in the area and would be a very big player, but their problems right now are mainly internal. Within the past weeks, they have removed the elected president of Egypt out of power, and the military has kind of stepped in to maintain order, and they've nominated their own interim leaders. The big problem is the fact that the military did this. Most people would call it a coup. They overthrew the government and installed their own. And in those cases, the United States law says that when there is a coup, we have to stop providing foreign aid to that country. But some people don't really want to label it a coup. They basically did the same thing back in the Arab Spring when they did this a year or two ago. But the White House has issued statements to the effect of the situation is complicated and we want to take some time to think about it.
Morsi supporters have continued to rally over the past 10 days against his overthrow, which took place back on July 3rd. Here's what President Obama said at the time.
They went through an election process that, by all accounts, were legitimate, and Mr. Morsi was elected. And the U.S. government's attitude has been we would deal with a democratically elected government. What we've also said is that democracy is not just about elections. It's also about how are you working with an opposition? How do you treat dissenting voices? How do you treat minority groups? What is clear right now is that although Mr. Morsi was elected democratically, there's more work to be done to create the conditions in which everybody feels that their voices are heard and that the government is responsive and truly representative. And so what we've encouraged the government to do is to reach out to the opposition and work through these issues in a political process. It's not the U.S.'s job to determine what that process is, but what we have said is go through processes that are legitimate and observe rule of law. So we're going to continue to work with all parties inside of Egypt to try to channel this through legal, legitimate processes.
So there's a difference between the first revolution and this current one in the fact that the second one, they overthrew a generally accepted, rightfully elected democratic president, when before they had ousted what for all intents and purposes was a dictator. because you want the Egyptian people to be able to have faith in their government and have the government they want. But then again, the world has an obligation to stand on the side of the right. When it comes to the Middle East, sometimes that's not always an obvious thing to be able to decide.
Okay, the ongoing saga of Edward Snowden. What is the latest with him?
The thing that at least the media is most happy about is they got a new picture of Snowden because he had arranged to have a meeting with members of Human Rights Watch. And they came in, Russia facilitated letting them into the transit area where Snowden has been for the past few weeks. They had a little meeting. Snowden issued a letter. These human rights workers, brought back out. I think the next current move is Snowden applying. He applied to Russia for asylum, and then they said he had to stop hurting the United States, and he withdrew that application. I think that the more significant step after the meeting and the statement is that they think he's going to apply for temporary asylum in Russia so that he would be able to get out of the airport and be able to roam freely and have more opportunities to get to where he wants to go, because if they offer him temporary asylum, he's free to roam around in Russia. And I don't think that the CIA would go in and kidnap him from Russia, because nothing else made the Russians mad. Violating their sovereignty would. But it's not clear on whether or not temporary asylum is something that could be had, or whether it would be subject to the same conditions that his first application for asylum would have. But we know that he tried to make the case how terrible the Obama administration and U.S. government was treating somebody seeking asylum by revoking his passport and making him a stateless person. And he's gotten an offer of asylum if he can get there, I suppose.
Wow, okay. We'll keep following that. It seems to be ongoing all the time. A prominent defense analysis group says it has identified a previously undisclosed missile site in Saudi Arabia's desert with signs suggesting Iran and Israel could be targeted in a possible launch from the location.
Yeah, they were going over satellite images, and just like we could identify the missile sites in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they identified something that wasn't on their registry. Jane's Defense Review is a long-standing, world-recognized source for defense news, and they looked at these satellite images and saw missiles. They think they're DF-3 missiles, which can go 1,500 to 2,500 miles, but the physical position of them, even though Iran's just a few dozen miles across the Strait of Hormuz and Israel's right above them, the missiles and their launchers are aimed in those two directions, respectively. And Saudi Arabia doesn't have the greatest of relations with either of them. The government of Saudi Arabia hasn't made a statement, hadn't answered to any of these questions yet, so there's not a whole lot of news out there, except for the fact that we've discovered these missile sites.
They're probably like, oh man, they discovered, we've got them.
We have military presence in Saudi Arabia, and the Middle East is one of the most looked at places in the world. And it just surprised me that all of a sudden we were surprised to find a missile site that we are said to have not known about before.
Check this out. A Russian state service in charge of safeguarding Kremlin communications is looking to purchase an array of old-fashioned typewriters to prevent leaks from computer hardware.
Yeah, the Russians...
That makes sense, actually.
Well, they're acting on all these revelations from Snowden and finding out that the U.S. has spied on the EU and countries and blah, 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 and they realize that the more digital and computerized their communications are, the easier and it would be to steal or leak this kind of information. A typewriter...
They're going to lose a lot of technology and the ability to store data and stuff, won't they? Going back to the typewriter?
I mean, it worked well for a lot of things when it was in widespread use. I think the more important thing about a typewriter is not the fact that it's not a computer, but that typewriters have fingerprints. Every typewriter places its letters on the page in a certain unique way, so if something did get leaked, you had the document, you could source it back to the typewriter that made it. Even if this information got leaked, if nothing else, they would know who did it.
That's very neat. I like that. Coming up here on Parts in the Sum of the Whole, we have a very cool history lesson.
A lot of good ones happened this week.
Yes, lots of good stuff. And also, we're going to feature one of our contributors, Pat Hardy, and his review of Black Sabbath's 13, their new album out, and what he thinks of that. You might want to go out and grab it. Plus, you're going to get to find out who makes the dirty laundry list this week.
Oh, man, that guy.
Yes. Here on Parts in the Sum of the Whole, stick around.
I have played some characters you could call controlling, but the truth is, there's so much in life we can't control. Here's something we can: colorectal cancer. It's the second leading cancer killer in the U.S., but it is almost entirely preventable. Most colon cancers start as polyps, and screening finds polyps so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. If you're over 50, get screened. Screening saves lives. It could really save your life.
Ronnie, it's that time of the show where we jump in the time machine. You have the TARDIS, right?
Yeah.
You can use the TARDIS from Doctor Who.
You got a Wayback Machine in the back here somewhere, too. You rather do the Rocky and Bullwinkle kind of deal.
Whatever machine you want to use, we're going to jump back in time and check out This Week in History. This week in 1955, Disneyland opened up, and unfortunately, they originally sent out passes to people.
Like golden tickets?
Yeah, kind of like come to our opening day type of thing.
The
but
Wonka factory.
The passes were counterfeited. And
oh, well, yeah, of course.
Thousands of uninvited people were admitted into Disneyland on opening day. The park was certainly not ready for the public. Food ran out. The drinks ran out. A woman got stuck in wet asphalt on Main Street, USA.
Nice.
And the Mark Twain steamboat nearly capsized from too many passengers. So, talk about a trial run.
Oh, it's 55. There are anti-counterfeiting measures in the industry in 55. Couldn't have been that sophisticated. Of course, I guess mimeograph machines were harder to come by, but I go to a school and take the whole class. Got stuck in wet asphalt. That cracks me up.
But the $17 million theme park was built on 160 acres of orange groves in Anaheim, California there. And Disneyland hosts more than 14 million visitors a year who spend close to $3 billion.
Every kid wants to go to Disney. You know where I wanted to go when I was growing up?
Where?
Space Camp.
Oh, in
Huntsville,
Alabama.
Yeah, I wanted to go there so bad. I never wanted to go to Disneyland.
Have you ever seen the movie?
Yes. But I like that little ball robot. He looks like a toy model of the Death Star on four little thin caster legs.
Yeah, it's got what's her face?
Leah Thompson?
Leah Thompson from Back to the Future.
Cute.
Oh, yeah. She's in that.
She's one of my earliest celebrity crushes.
Space Camp, gotta love it. But as we salute Disneyland opening up on This Week in 1955, some people may recall by visiting Disneyland in the early days, actually in 1972, the Main Street Electrical Parade. The first one debuted in 72. The Magic Kingdom received its own version in 1977. It was performed nightly through 1991, and then it went away. It returned in 99 through 2001, and then came back one final time in 2010. So now the electrical parade is history, but a lot of folks have great memories of that, even me. And so here's a little salute to Disneyland and the Main Street Electrical Parade with Walt Disney doing the opening ceremonies. Check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Disneyland proudly presents the Main Street Electrical Parade.
All who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past. And here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world. Thank you.
It was This Week in 1945, Ronnie, 5:29 and 45 seconds in the morning. The Manhattan Project comes to an explosive end as the first atom bomb is successfully tested in New Mexico.
That's a hell of a sunrise that day.
Yes, and they had, wasn't that the one where they had all of the service members?
No, not the first one. They did that. They weren't even sure the bomb was going to work, and half of them thought that if it did, it might vaporize the air and take with it all the oxygen, or it might crack the crust of the earth. They just had no idea what it was going to actually do when they detonated it. It was the first test, the Trinity test.
It was interesting to see in some of the reports that 800 meters or 800 yards that turned the sand into glass.
Yeah, it's a process called vitrification. It's when the sand is basically silica. You can make glass out of sand if you heat it up and you go to a glass blowing place and they do that. It was so hot that it did that to the sand in the desert in a split second.
Wow. Who were some of the people in charge of the Manhattan Project atom bomb test, Trinity?
It started when Einstein had written and signed this letter to President Roosevelt urging him to start this kind of research program because the Germans had been doing it too. Mm-hmm. They eventually abandoned their research into it, but it had a military director, General Leslie Groves, who kind of made sure that the project ran. They built a city town in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and to produce uranium. They built a little town just like it in Washington to produce plutonium. Then they had the thing in the desert. And Robert Oppenheimer, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, was the chief scientist, and he was the one that actually ran the project.
All right, well, here's how it sounded that day, and we'll come back and comment real quick. Dr. Oppenheimer is speaking towards the end of this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1...
would not be the same. Few people laughed, few people cried, most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
So he was quoting a book on that? Or
yeah.
What was...
The Hindu religion has several primary ancient texts, like we have the Old Testament, the books in it, and one of them is called the Bhagavad Gita, and it's a collection that tells the story of their gods. But in this one section, these gods are getting in this situation, and I think that's my favorite line out of any religious scripture, generally like that. But Oppenheimer later on in his life said that the minute he saw the bomb go off in the test, he immediately regretted the fact that they had learned how to build one. Yeah. And his utterance of "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds" was literally the first thought in a deeply emotional thought that was just an involuntary reaction to seeing what he had helped create, because he knew what it would do if we used it in war.
Here's a little footnote on that. The original $6,000 budget for the Manhattan Project finally ballooned to a total cost of $2 billion.
Yeah, and that's not even converted to what it would be in today's money. I think most money calculations for that long generally go to about 20 times that amount would be the equivalent today, so $40 billion.
Wow,
in today's money?
Yes, that's crazy money there.
Yeah.
Well, we continue our travel back in time, and I love that commercial, Franklin Delano. This week in 1940, Franklin Delano Roosevelt first took office in 1933 as America's 32nd president, nominated for an unprecedented third term. Roosevelt, of course a Democrat, would eventually be elected to a record 4 terms in office, the only U.S. president to serve more than 2 terms. Let's hear a little excerpt from what he had to say around that time he was re-elected.
My conscience will not let me turn my back upon a call to service. The right to make that call rests with the people through the American method of a free election. I say to you in the utmost simplicity, I will, with God's help, continue to serve with the best of my ability and with the fullness of my strength.
Well, that right there is a man that really, really believes in the way it should be.
Well, this is 1940. America still wasn't in World War II, and a lot of people didn't want us to get into it. Roosevelt knew that he had to help, so he was trying all these measures that barely skirted the legal line, like the Lend-Lease program, giving supplies to our allies, and then he stepped it up with providing naval escort ships for the merchant ships traveling between the U.S. and England, and then they started hunting submarines, and finally it wasn't until December 41 when we finally got into the war. But one of the campaign promises he made in that third campaign thing was that he wouldn't send our boys to fight in a foreign war, and he did everything he could short of that until Pearl Harbor was attacked and the country demanded that we go to war.
Unfortunately, on April 12, 1945, Roosevelt, who had suffered from various health problems for years, died at the age of 63 in Georgia.
Less than 4 months into his 4th term.
Yeah, didn't make it that far at all. Of course, Vice President Harry S. Truman took over. Congress then passed in 47 the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which at that point stated that no person could be elected to the office of president more than twice. Well, our final trip back into history here in our machine, whichever machine we're using. This is the 44th anniversary of the moon landing.
Right.
The very first moon landing with Neil Armstrong and all of the crew. And
just as a side note, it happened, people. It's real. Quit saying it's a hoax.
Even though American Dad says it was in a CIA room and we recorded it.
Yeah.
Damn it, Francine. At 10:56 p.m., American astronaut Neil Armstrong, on July 20th, 240,000 miles from Earth, spoke these words to more than 1 billion people listening at home. Check this out.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Well, they landed, okay, and then everybody at Mission Control was waiting on him to step onto the moon's surface. Here's what happened.
I'm going to step off the land now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Did you know, Ronnie, that when they started walking around on the surface and kind of playing around, did you know they were actually singing and having a good time? Did you ever hear those transmissions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of our listeners haven't heard it. Here's one of the astronauts on the original moon landing, kind of having a good time singing while he's bouncing around on the moon. Check it out.
Hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along.
So there you go. Even though they're on the public and world stage, having some fun.
We got to. What's the point of being an adventuring hero if you can't enjoy it?
Right. They can look back at that and say, hey, I was singing on the moon. Well, time to hop back to the year 2013, Ronnie. And so welcome back. I enjoy our trips back in history.
Are you ready? Let's go.
HometownStation.net. We play what we like.
Check out Black Sabbath 13, the latest offering from Ozzy and the crew, in stores now. And our latest contribution from Pat Harding with this music review on the album. He's glad he finally got to check this record out. So far he's heard Tony's dark, muddy gothic riffs melting with Ozzy's voice in true Sabbath fashion. Really pay attention to the first 2 songs. Love them. But all in all, this album is a beast. Check it out in stores now. Black Sabbath 13. Welcome back to Parts and the Sum of the Whole. I'm Brian Vance, along with Ronnie Glenn. Thanks for joining us each and every week. Coming up next week, we have another interview with the GHOST team. It is the acronym GHOST, which stands for Ghost Hunters of Ohio and Southern Territories. Nathan Fairchild leading the team there. We're going to speak to all of them, and we're actually going to be helping them out on some video. They travel to locations with reports of paranormal activity and unexplained phenomena. You can check out their page. It's on Facebook, Ghost Hunters of Ohio and Southern Territories. Like their page. They have 1,198 likes so far. We'll talk to them about some of their upcoming ghost hunts next week here on the show. As we like to do each and every week, focus on our veterans. Good news out of the Department of Veterans Affairs this past week. It announced it's tripling to $300 million, the investment provided to community groups such as Goodwill Industries, Catholic Charities, and Salvation Army to expand efforts for ending homelessness among veterans and their families. And President Obama vowed in 2009 to end veteran homelessness. Since then, the number of veterans without shelter increased slightly in 2010 to 76,329, and then decreased 18% in 2012, according to figures from the VA. But it's tremendous progress, and the VA has not so far reported on downward trend and homeless issues for younger veterans who served in Iraq or Afghanistan. As of last December, the latest data available, according to the VA, there were 26,531 of them either living on the streets, at risk of losing their homes, staying in temporary housing, or receiving federal vouchers to pay for rent. And that was an increase from 10,500 in 2010. But the expanded VA support program known as Supportive Services for Veterans Families is the crown jewel in the fight against veteran homelessness. So there you go, some good news out of the VA.
Yeah, good for them. I know what it's like to be homeless, and it's not fun. So, I mean, and I didn't even serve my country. So I'm glad they're getting some help.
And if you have a comment or maybe an idea on what we can focus on as far as the veteran stories each and every week, just leave us a comment on our page, facebook.com/partsinthesum, or go to www.partsinthesum.com. That is the main page with daily news summaries, and also you can find our podcast there each and every Sunday.
Yeah, we're trying to get everything migrated back over to it. So
we have a feel-good story today.Ronnie, tell us about that.
I don't know if it's necessarily feel good, but it's definitely inspiring. There was wasn't religious, but kind of a missionary guy that went to Egypt to teach English to kids who only speak Arabic, and he died over there. About a week before he died, though, he wrote a letter home to one of the kids that he had mentored at a summer camp. And the letter that he wrote and the advice that he wanted to give this kid, especially as relatively it was the last thing he ever really said, so you can consider it last words. But it was just amazing, and he said this: "Dear Justin, hello, how are you, man? I can't believe it's been a year since camp. I'm sure you're a wiser, taller, and smarter since I saw you last. Please accept my apologies that I will not be there for the graduation ceremony. Right now I'm in Alexandria, Egypt, teaching English to young students who are around your age. They all speak Arabic, so learning English as a second language is quite difficult. But they are really intelligent, just like you. You would really like the Arabic language. You should check it out. Egypt is hazardous right now because the country is feeling the consequences of an enormous political revolution. I lose electricity and water all the time, but that's okay, because I have many Egyptian friends to help take care of me. When I'm in trouble, they take care of me, and when they are in trouble, I always take care of them. Good friends do not come easily, but as a rule, I always appreciate the good deeds people do for me, even if I don't know them well. What is most important is that I am trying to do my best for others. I want to surround myself with good people. I did not come up with this personal philosophy on my own. Without thoughtful and caring people like you, I would probably be a mean and grumpy person. Your kind heart and genuine character serve as a model for me. I hope that you will never stop your curiosity for the beautiful things in life. Go on hikes in forests, canyons, and mountains, go fishing, research wildlife, and get out of the city if you can. Surround yourself with good friends who care about your future. Fall in love with someone. Get your heart broken, and then move on and fall in love again. Breathe life every day like it is your first. Find something you love to do and never stop doing that unless you find something else you love more. Don't blame others for their mistakes. It makes you weak. You are a strong man who does not need to be weighted down by people who only complain and say negative things. Speak with conviction. Believe in yourself, because your personal confidence is just as important as your education. I wish I could be there to say my congratulations, but I know it wouldn't change much. You earned it. Hopefully one day you will hang up this diploma next to your high school and college diplomas as well. Try not to forget me. If you ever need anything, just email me. Best regards, your friend, Andrew Proctor."
And Andrew passed away.
Yeah, it was about a week after he wrote this letter, he was killed in Egypt.
Wow. What an inspirational letter that is. It sort of sums up a lot.
Especially thinking about it as last words, or even just the fact that there are people out there that try to help others, a summer camp for kids, whatever, and feel as strongly as they do that it's not just a superficial thing to earn college money over the summer, but I don't think you could doubt that he cared about this kid that he had mentored at a summer camp, He's in Egypt and writes this letter back on occasion for the kid's graduation from something or another. It doesn't specify, but he wasn't just faking it.
Yeah. You
And
posted that story on our site, right?
Yeah, there's a link up to it. You can read it. There's a picture of him there, too.
Wow.
I read that. I don't really ever read images that come up in my Facebook thing unless, I can see him, blah, blah, blah. But I clicked on that just because it was a letter that he wrote a week before he died, and I read the letter, and the only thing I could think to say about it when I posted the link was that it was very, very humbling and very, very inspiring. I don't think I could have sat down and been that clear and heartfelt, I guess. But it's nice to know that there are people out there that are.
Yes, it gives you a lump in your throat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a great story. I'm glad you found it and brought it up to us.
Well, Amanda likes good stories. We talk about a lot of bad things.
And I want to rehash the trivia again real quick. The question, of course, Northern Colorado is wanting to secede and form a 51st state, but there have been 5 successful states in creating a new one out of an original state. I need the name of those 5 states. And you could win our prize this week, which is a Facebook gift card. We do have some dirty laundry to share with you. We'll find out who makes that list coming up next here on Parts and the Sum of the Whole.
You are a waste. A loser. Everyone hates you. Why don't you just stay in your car and keep driving? I'm serious. Drive until you run out of gas, then get out of your car and walk until you find someone who doesn't think you're dumber than bricks. Could take a while, but at least all that walking might burn a couple of calories.
You may not witness bullying like this every day. Your kids do. They want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov to learn safe, simple ways your child can help stop bullying. Be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
Ronnie, time now for our Dirty Laundry segment, and, well, it makes it easy for me to choose who gets the Dirty Laundry aired, because they just step right in. And
there's never a shortage of them, I'll tell you that.
Never a shortage. Several people could have qualified this week, but I think top honors go to San Diego Mayor Bob Filner, who has gotten himself into some hot water in several different issues.
Disgraced the respectability of my office.
Yes. And I guess former councilwoman Donna Fry obtained more information recently, credible evidence that the mayor actually sexually harassed more than one woman, including herself. She's asked him to step down, and here's what he had to say about it, and Bob Filner is our Dirty Laundry winner of the week.
I have diminished the office to which you elected me, and I have reached into my heart and soul and realized I must and will change my behavior. I am embarrassed to admit that I have failed to fully respect the women who work for me and with me, and that at times I have intimidated them. It's a good thing that behavior that would have been tolerated in the past is being called out in this generation for what it is: inappropriate and wrong. I am also humbled to admit that I need help. I have begun to work with professionals to make changes in my behavior and approach. In addition, my staff and I will participate in sexual harassment training provided by the city. You have every right to be disappointed in me. I only ask that you give me an opportunity to prove I am capable of change so that the vision I have for our city's future can be realized.
Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down. Well, hey, thanks. Welcome back, and it's time for us to take off here in just a few seconds. Want to remind you that next week's show is on the 21st. Talking to the Ghost members next week on the show, and another chance to win some great prizes. And just come and join us for some good times here on Parts and the Sum of the Whole. Ronnie, we're out of time. You have a good one.
I'll try.
Thanks for listening to Parts and the Sum of the Whole. Be sure to follow our page all week long for the latest news from all over the world. Items discussed in the show do not specifically reflect the views of our source networks and media partners. Our weekly podcast is produced by Panman Media Studios. Visit our website, www.partsinthesum.com. Copyright 2013. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. Thomas Jefferson.